They are printing money. They are not manufacturing anything at all. It's printing money. And this has been one of their weapons globally. The monetary system, the global monetary system, controlled by dollar and euro, has been used. Sanctions here, sanctions there, sanctions there, grabbing this account, grabbing that account, has been one of their tools. This is not going to continue indefinitely. And we need a new financial architecture globally, not controlled by euro, not controlled by the dollar, not controlled by other currencies. To me, this failure of the attempt to contain Russia will immediately move to the east. Containing China is their next agenda.
In the name of giving us liberation, they never actually left our beloved continent. Economic liberation was denied the Africans to this day. If you go into any African country today, the majority of the employers are multinational companies from those colonies, former colonies, who never left at independence in the 1950s to 60s. The colonizers have never left Africa.
Greetings from DRAR for Africa. In this enlightening episode, we spotlight African leaders passionately advocating for a unified front in reducing reliance on Western nations by fostering cooperation and launching joint development projects. These leaders aim to steer their nations toward mutual growth and resilience, turning in to witness the strategies and aspirations that pave the way for African independent future. Let's begin.
We need to get out of this, I call it the law of the jungle. This is the law of the jungle. And no one is happy with this state of affairs. This attempt of unipolarization, using every weapon to intimidate, to sabotage, and even contain everybody is not acceptable by anyone, by any standard. So our new order will have to be based on the respect of rule of law, the respect of sovereignty, non-interference, cooperation, complementarity, and then making it safer for humanity to progress. This ideology will have to be fought. It has to become history, and that can only be done by a solidarity amongst peoples, and what Russia can do and what other nations can do, what China can do, and in solidarity with all those who've been marginalized. Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe will have to come together and not only face this challenge, but work together to create a new environment different to what we see now. Unipolar, domination, containment, sabotage, sanctions. We need to get out of this cycle. This cycle is not at all acceptable by humanity.
And now a lot of experts in business circles as well are discussing the so-called de-dollarization, the getting rid of dollar in bilateral trade. So first of all, what, as for you, is the reason behind this process, and can our two countries, Russia and Eritrea, also move to national currencies in bilateral trade?
This is a very natural partnership. It's a natural partnership based on shared values, based on shared ideas and strategies for the future. This kind of relationship is exemplary. It's a model. Probably next time we'll have a broader scope. We say, well, bilateral relationship is critical, but we have to look at it from a broader scope. The regional context is very important. The continental concept is very important. The global setting is, again, very important. So our bilateral partnership has its dimensions: regional, continental, global. And definitely the collapse of this hegemonistic unipolar world order is behind us. At least now we are in the transition. This is a transition phase. This phase will have to be overcome, and we'll have to prepare the ground for the future relationships of nations. And Russian Federation working with Eritrea, Russian Federation working with Africa, with a number of other regions in the world, is a very natural need for humanity. Humanity will have to get out of this cycle and move forward to creating a new environment, a new world order.
Do you think that Africa will play a bigger, more important role in this new world order?
Africa is the most marginalized continent And Africa has more of interest than anybody else. Africa should be more interested, and Africa is more interested now because of the failures and because of the marginalization, its exploitation, looting, destroying communities, creating crisis here and crisis there, and making Africa a recipient of aid when 60% of global endowments are in the continent. Why should Africa remain marginalized? And Africa have more interest than anybody else to join in this solidarity for creating a new world order.
Does the absence of colonial ambitions from the side of Russia have an impact on relations with Eritrea and with other African states?
The ideology is nothing new. Slavery was there. These guys were behind slavery. Okay? They migrated to the Americas. They exterminated the indigenous people. After exterminating the indigenous people, they came up with slaves from Africa. And their cotton plantation and their economy will have to be sustained by slavery. From slavery to colonialism, from colonialism to unipolar system. It's not a new ideology. Humanity has suffered a lot from this ideology. And this is the 21st century. We are not living in the Middle Age. We have to find a way of living in a modern world. It's very simple. But the culture, this culture of unipolar or the colonial, neo-colonial slavery is one ideology. We have to get out of this cycle and create a new environment.
Well, I like to think, if I were to use the biblical terms, this is a revelation among Black people. They're waking up and realizing that what has been happening is wrong, and change must come. And for true change to come, it must be brought by the people. What you are seeing is an African electorate that is now awoken, that is informed. They understand the real issues. In the past, Africans have been misinformed, misled, and given false information, and being thrown a shiny object and being told only the African heads of states are the problem. But now they understand the invisible hand and the role that the invisible hand is playing to make sure that Africa remains where they want Africa to be. The African heads of states, particularly those heads of states of the former French colonies, majority of them were just puppets put in place to continue the same French legacy, which basically boxed them in, where it said you have no control of your military, you have no control of your natural resources, you have no control of your finances, and if you continue from those three areas, you are free to rule your country any which way you want. What power does that president have? And in the past, any president that has tried to back the system and do something about taking control of the financial resources, and I'm talking about African countries depositing their bank reserves with France. I'm talking about African countries giving up their natural resources, no value addition, France having first right of refusal for all the natural resources discovered yet to be discovered, France companies having first right of refusal for all contracts, large, small, private, public, France having military presence in those countries, and France having the ability to invade them in the event that they feel their interests are being violated. France making sure that those countries can only be trained by France, the military can only be trained by France. The military equipment can only be bought from France. Come on now. Our people didn't understand all this.
It was not only Africa that was colonized, but also much of Asia, India, Indonesia, Indochina, Burma, the Philippines, Malaysia, etc., and the subjugation and extermination of the indigenous people of the Americas and Australia. However, these criminal acts by the imperialists, the slave trade and colonialism, provoked the colonized people into launching a resistance movement by some of the Black people in the United States of America, in the persons of Du Bois and Pademont, who launched the Pan-African movement. This was the first step. Secondly, In 1912, the African National Congress of South Africa was launched, led by new resistance fighters, different from before, when the leaders of the resistance were the kings and chiefs, such as Kabarega of Uganda, Mkwawa of Tanzania, Lobengura of Zimbabwe, Mwanga of Uganda. Thirdly, the huge country of the Soviet Union was taken over by communists in 1917, and so was the huge country of China in 1949. Those communists were staunch anti-imperialists. Fourthly, our good fortune was that the greedy imperialists started fighting among themselves over us. I'm referring here to the so-called First and Second World Wars. In effect, these were inter-imperialist wars vying for domination of the world. In those wars, the imperialists weakened themselves to the advantage of the anti-colonial movement. That is how India, Pakistan, Indonesia, etc. got independence. Some of the imperialists tried to cling to colonies, but they were defeated in Algeria, Vietnam, Kenya, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and South Africa.
The problems of Africa, such as youth unemployment, poverty, disease, starvation, those are the leaves on a tree. They're drying up. Today, this country has the problem. Tomorrow is that country. Tomorrow is... Those are the issues. They're leaves. They're going to come and go. The branches, they're going to die, but they'll come back season after another. But until you address the issues of the root, this tree will always be a problem. For Africa, the root has to do with the Berlin Conference. We must be clear that the Berlin Conference is alive and well. A decision that was made 124 years ago remains alive and well today. In addition, after the Berlin Conference, they did something just as deplorable. They set out to let the Africans believe everything African was bad and everything European was better and more desirable. That's the rule of divide and conquer. That's the legacy of colonization. Have you ever wondered why, when you try to go home at the airport, if you travel with our brothers and sisters who happen to be Caucasian, they get better treatment by our own people? I was trying to go through the airport, I won't mention which country, in Africa. I called the porter 3 times. The man would come and hang around. The minute I look another way, he's gone. I later found out from one of the porters that, we are looking for the white people because they pay more. My own people are discriminating against me. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. Thanks to the legacy of colonization. Thanks to the rule of divide and conquer. Those are some of our realities. How do you address that? We must understand it. We must realize on an individual basis that we are suffering from this affliction that is called the legacy of colonization and the legacy of slavery. Hey, I ask you to understand the Berlin Conference and its relevance to you today. Its relevance in your family today. Its relevance to your country and to your continent and to the world wherever black people are. So we got 2 issues. The legacy of slavery, the legacy of colonizations. 2 demons that we must fight. 2 afflictions that we must accept, that we suffer from. And let's make every effort to defeat those demons within us in order for us to truly represent our Africa with full understanding of the issues. So as we look for a solution, our minds are clear and our minds are in the right place. Allow me to take a moment to then take you to 1963. Our Pan-African leaders realizing that in order for Africa to move forward, Africa must speak with one voice. One continent, one country, one heart, one mind, one soul. So they met in Addis Ababa in 1963, and they created the OAU, Organization of African Unity. It was an attempt to regroup and undo the boundaries that were imposed upon us. Unfortunately, when they went to Addis Ababa, they were still divided. We had the Casablanca group who were Pan-Africanists who says African Union now, Africa for the Africans. But unfortunately, there were only 7 of them. Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. And the rest of the African countries were the nationalists. They were the Monrovia group. They said, no, let's go slow. They won. We often say, when the Pan-Africanists lost in 1963, Africa lost.
1900, the whole of Africa had been colonized, except for Ethiopia. Africa had been colonized partly because of our internal weaknesses. We had feudal chiefs who were incapable, who could not defend our independence. And Africa had been being ravaged by the slave trade for almost 400 years before the colonization of 1900. When the African chiefs failed to defend our independence, the Africans started organizing, led by new forces. And the first group was in South Africa in 1912, when the African National Congress was founded. That was now the modern African anti-colonial resistance movement. Fortunately, and that's how Russia comes in 1917, a new force took over Russia. These were the Bolsheviks. I don't know what problems you have with the Bolsheviks, whether you like them or you don't, but for us, we appreciate them because they supported us. They started supporting our anti-colonial struggle. And that is our relationship with Russia. Russia, so the Soviet Union, supporting the anti-colonial movement in Africa. Then in 1949, we were also lucky to have a new force, the communists, taking over China, the big country of China. And again, they supported us. Then we had some other socialist countries, Cuba and so on. So therefore, whenever issues come up, and some people want us to take positions against Russia, we say, but you people, these people have been with us for the last 100 years. How can we be automatically against them? We have even forgiven our former enemies, the colonialists, the ones who had colonized us, the ones who had actually taken slaves from here and did bad things. We have forgiven them and we are working with them. How can we be against somebody who has never harmed us and who instead helped us?